and now attack results, really tragic results and horrific circumstances. It's just unconscionable.
More widely on energy security, do you think the ramifications of the invasion will be on that energy security and indeed energy prices around the world?
Implemented sanctions between the United States and Europe and in Asia in an unprecedented way because the unity is what makes it successful. But there are two elements that make sanctions successful. One is making them as multilateral as possible, and the second, making sure that you are hitting the intended party, Putin and Russia, and not ourselves. And so I think the energy piece is the trickiest part of it, because that is the only thing their economy has. The Russian economy has been so mismanaged under Putin that is all that's left is things that come out of the ground, natural resources, so oil, gas, coal, metals, minerals, and that's it. And what we're seeing now is, even though we have time and again have stated very clearly that we are going to allow for transactions in oil and gas to continue, the market is essentially self-sanctioned and does not want anything to do with Russia's oil.
Just to be clear on that, I mean, you're saying that you're opposed to specific sanctions on oil and gas supplies?
No, I'm not saying that. I'm saying that we have to look at, when we get to the issue of oil and gas sanctions, what we've done so far is try to sanction pieces of that industry while allowing and enabling the transactions. If we can continue down that road while we continue to mitigate the concerns for the U.S. economy, for the European economy, and the global economy, I think that's going to be the best and most effective way to hit the Russians and make it clear that there are consequences to their actions.
President Putin, as the president of the country and therefore in charge of the economy, if he is making, I saw one estimate today, about $700 million a day from selling oil and gas abroad, if we were to say, look, this war isn't ending and it's not going to end soon, and we have to hit the Kremlin where it hurts, and just simply say we're not going to, those revenues have to stop because they're paying for the war, could that happen without a huge economic shock around the world? Is the answer no?
No, I think the answer is yes. And again, I'm saying we have to develop these sanctions so that we do what you just said. We have to hit him and Russia where it hurts. So, exports oil by revenue, it really touches China and other countries. So what we have to do is we have to continue to do what we've done so far, is to be very smart about this. We are hitting Russia in a way that no one has imagined, definitely not the Russians. And we are looking constantly at taking more aggressive measures and invoking more pain on Russia, but we are also always looking at how can we do it in ways that only he suffers and not the Europeans. President Biden said it very clearly, we're all going to have to take some pain in this.
And just on that, one final question. Is there a danger that as Russian troops take control of more areas in Ukraine and more facilities, is there a danger that they could then cut off the gas that transits through Ukraine? Is that a possibility?
It is absolutely a possibility. We monitor that very, very closely on a daily basis. And that's why we are looking at what will be the alternatives to making sure that Europe not only has been able to get through this winter, but to ensure that we have enough supplies coming over the next spring and summer so that there are enough supplies for next winter. That is critically important. But you're right. There are more cards to be played here on both sides.
And that was Amos Hochstein, Senior Advisor on Energy Security at the US State Department. You're listening to News Hour from the BBC World Service. 25 years, New Yorkers have been listening to WNYC for reliable news and conversation. Now there's another way to do it. Just ask your smart speaker to play WNYC. Learn how at WNYC.org/smartspeaker.
WNYC is supported by Hulu, presenting the new limited series, The Dropout. Starring Amanda Seyfried, the series explores the rise and fall of Elizabeth Holmes, the founder and CEO of Theranos, who sought to revolutionize the face of healthcare. Streaming now on Hulu. 59E59 Theaters, presenting the off-Broadway premiere of Happenstance Theater's Barococo, a comedy of 18th century manners. Running now through March 6th. Tickets available at 59E59.org.
This is WNYC 93.9 FM and AM 820. NPR News and the New York Conversation. This is Jason Anders with News Hour live from the BBC. War in Ukraine is also an information war, and the Kremlin has intensified its efforts to control the narrative of the conflict and silence dissent. New legislation has just been passed, making the spreading of what the authorities call fake information about the armed forces a criminal offense with penalties of up to 15 years. Russian media have been told to only call the invasion a special military operation. Well, all that's led to the BBC to temporarily suspend its operations in Russia, and two of the last independent Russian outlets have closed down. The radio station Echo Moskvy and the online TV station Dozhd, also known as TV Rain. Tikhon Jazko is Dozhd editor. He's now left Russia. So is that it for the channel?
I think it is for now. You could say the same about Russian journalism, but I'm absolutely sure that it's not the end. But in these circumstances, it is impossible to work as an independent, normal media outlet in Russia, because you have two options. Whether you lie and you don't tell all the truth to your audience about the war in Ukraine, or you shut down and stop operating. We choose the second option.
And the new law that's been brought in, quite apart from the fact that you were actually closed down by the authorities, the new law would have made it impossible for you to do independent reporting of the war, right?
Yes, exactly. That's why we chose option number 2. Because of this law, if you tell your viewers or your listeners or your readers the truth about the war, you could face 15 years in prison. So it's an act of military censorship. It is something that Russia, I think, haven't experienced in years or in tens of years. That's just terrible.
I mean, it feels like the Soviet Union again, doesn't it?
Absolutely, absolutely. And these war on words, like if you say war, you're a criminal. If you say special military operation, you're not a criminal. If you say invasion, you're a criminal. That's just ridiculous. But it would be ridiculous if it didn't mean up to 15 years in jail.
So what does that mean for you and your colleagues, your staff? What are you going to do?
Well, me and some of my colleagues, we decided to leave the country, at least for some time, because the situation now is very dangerous for independent journalists, especially for those who reported about war in Ukraine. We want to look now how the situation is developing and then make our decisions. But it's not safe to be in Russia anymore, unfortunately.
Yes, and indeed, the BBC today has announced that it's suspending operations out of Moscow too. And Russian media's been under pressure for years, of course, but is this the end of free, independent reporting in Russia?
Well, I don't know whether it's the end or not, but of course it's the new level of repression. We've never experienced something like this. It is a new level of attack on freedom of speech by authorities, but even in these circumstances, I'm still pretty optimistic when I look into the future. I just don't think that the system with stupid and crazy restrictions like this could survive for long.
Will there still be opportunities for Russians who want to seek out alternatives to find out what's really going on in Ukraine? Will they be able to do that?
I think yes, because there is a very important thing. There is a huge request among Russian people to the independent alternative information. I am so sure because I know the numbers of our audience, and I am sure that people will find ways to get this information.
Tikhon Zhadko of Russia's TV Dost. The UN Refugee Agency says that 1 million people have now fled Ukraine since the Russian invasion began. Almost all of them women and children. More than half have gone to Poland, coming from or passing through the western Ukrainian city of Lviv, just over 40 miles from the border. Lviv isn't occupied for now, but there are people living there who know all too well what it means to be invaded, as Fergal Keane now reports. This man from the local administration is telling people it's okay if you just have a Ukrainian passport, you will be able to cross the borders. And that's a signal really of the cooperation that is now developing between Ukraine and Hungary, Poland, Slovakia, these countries along the borders, Moldova as well, of course, because people are leaving here trying to go to any border post they can to ensure that they're going to be safe. They're fleeing towards a Europe of democracy and union, forged in the aftermath of the Second World War. This extraordinary building that I'm standing in front of was built during the final times of the Austro-Hungarian Empire. Nobody knew, of course, that this was a dying epoch in Europe, the age of the great empires. But I'm standing in front of it now and watching thousands of people, as I have for several days, flooding in, hoping to get on trains to get away from here. So much history has happened in this city, which has always been half west, half east, a place fought over by different empires. It was Austro-Hungarian, it was Polish, it came under Nazi rule, then came under Soviet rule. The song from 1939 is called Only in Lviv. It invokes a city then on the edge of a catastrophe that neither singers or audience could have conceived. Here were terrible pogroms directed by the Nazis against Jews and roundups and murders of gypsies. Among those now fleeing are large family groups of Roma gypsies. I met one family who just arrived here from the embattled eastern city of Kharkiv. The father's name was Pavel, and around him 6 or 7 young children, his wife, Sofia, and a larger extended family, all wanting to get to the Polish border. What is it like in Kharkiv? The war is difficult, Pavel told me. Everything is burning, everything is destroyed. No one is listening to us, no one wants to help us. His daughter Sonia says, it's terrible. Of course you can't draw exact historical parallels, and one has to keep remembering that both Ukraine and Russia suffered appallingly in the Second World War, the civilians of both countries. History casts a long and deep shadow here. I'm going to go and see somebody at a centre which has been set up to help the Jewish community of this city in this time of trauma. 84-year-old Tatiana Zabramnaya is a Holocaust survivor.
I asked my mom about the war, what, when and why, but she could not tell it. She could not tell it without crying, and asking me not to be reminded about the war. My uncle and my aunt were in Kiev, and my mother told me they were shot. Who would have thought that, like in June 22nd, 1941, we would be invaded again? But from Russia, it is terrible.
At the railway station amid the crowds thronging to leave, a young refugee from Kharkiv sang a Ukrainian ballad. Story of survival, continuing cost. Fergal Keane reporting there from eastern Ukraine, and we'll be hearing from Lviv at the end of the program. News Hour's Tim Franks has just arrived there. He's going to be talking to us ahead of a few days of reporting from the city. You're listening to News Hour.
News Hour in the U.S. is made possible by American Public Media, producer and distributor of award-winning public radio content. APM, American Public Media, with support from Indeed, a hiring platform with the tools to help businesses attract, interview, and hire candidates. Learn more at Indeed.com/hire.
Becoming a sustaining member of WNYC during this pledge drive is a small gesture that has a big impact. By making a monthly donation to WNYC, you can sustain the reporting and journalism we bring you every day. You ensure that WNYC can be here for the entire community. Not a sustaining member yet? Become one now and make a meaningful difference. Go to WNYC.org or call 888-376-WNYC.
In the next 30 minutes, we'll talk to the mayor of the Ukrainian Black Sea port that repelled an incursion of Russian forces today. Also, more on the shelling of Ukraine's largest nuclear power plant. We'll talk to the energy ministry. We'll also hear from the U.S. Secretary of State, Antony Blinken. And we'll hear from the city of Lviv in western Ukraine, where News Hour's Tim Franks has just arrived. All that's coming up after the news.
BBC News. As fighting continues in Ukraine, Russian forces are making slow progress against stiff resistance. In the south, they have taken areas along the Black Sea coast and are surrounding the port city of Mariupol. The governor of Mykolaiv says Russian troops have been driven out of the city, but fighting is continuing on the outskirts. Analysts say President Putin has failed to achieve his initial objective of quickly overwhelming Ukraine's major cities. The G7 group of leading industrial powers has condemned Russia's attacks on Ukrainian civilians and civilian infrastructure, promising to hold those responsible for war crimes to account. G7 foreign ministers said the humanitarian toll of the unprovoked and unjustifiable war was catastrophic. They called for the swift implementation of humanitarian corridors. The BBC has suspended its operations in Russia after the introduction of new rules threatening journalists with prison sentences. Its Director General, Tim Davies, said the BBC News service in Russian would continue to operate from outside the country. President Putin has told the German Chancellor Olaf Scholz that Russia is open for dialogue with Ukraine, but only if all its demands are met. Mr. Putin denied that Russia was bombing Ukrainian cities, dismissing the evidence as fake. Mr. Scholz called on Mr. Putin to halt military action and allow access for humanitarian aid. The UN Security Council is holding an emergency meeting to discuss the safety of Ukraine's Zaporizhzhia nuclear plant after it was shelled and then captured by Russian forces. In other news, the U.S. Supreme Court has reinstated the death penalty for Johar Tsarnaev, who was convicted of the deadly 2013 Boston Marathon bomb attack. His ruling overturns a Court of Appeal decision that vacated his death sentence. BBC News.
Welcome back to News Hour. The response to the refugee crisis unfolding along Ukraine's 2,000-kilometre border to the west has been remarkable. Volunteers have joined charities, local councils and national governments to meet the needs of more than 1 million people who've crossed the border so far. Our correspondent Nick Thorpe lives in Budapest and has been reporting from Hungary's border with Ukraine for the past week. As he now reports, he spotted a familiar face there.
All sorts of equipment, from freezer to examination mat to chairs and electrocardiograms and blood sugar measures and all the equipment that a medical professional can need.
This is Andras. He's my family doctor in Budapest, 3 hours drive away. We normally meet in more mundane situations, like needing a quick PCR or antigen test. But I first got to know him during the last refugee crisis in Hungary in 2015, when he set up a mobile clinic. He's doing the same again now.
been there in 2015 twice. It was a different time, and the different people were coming from different locations, but they had the same problem, and we are facing the same situation, and we try to be there.
People are putting a brave face on it after quite harrowing journeys across Ukraine to get here, and often they're quite traumatized, including the children, but no one until now really has had time to deal with that.
I think what's important is hide any information from these children. So we have to be honest with the children, and we have to ask what kind of questions they have, and we have to answer all the questions honestly. It's very important because we're not able to prevent the trauma, but it's worsening if they don't really understand what's going on.
So Andras, the clinic's up and running now, and you've already had your first patients.
Yeah, we have already 3 patients, and most of them has high blood pressure, headache, and painful legs. And also, what we have seen, person who suffers from a psychiatric problem, and he lived in a facility for, I think, like 20 years, the same place, and it was destroyed by the Russian army, and he had to leave alone. He doesn't know what to do alone, and he just showed in his camera, in his telephone, the burning facility where he lived.
How did he get right away across Ukraine in wartime when he's been in care most of his life?
He followed the crowd, and that's all. Just follow the crowd.
Andras, you've only been here a few hours now. You don't know how long you're going to be here. How are you preparing yourself psychologically for the next weeks?
For me, this is the thing I can do to go here and help as a medical professional. And this is how I gain some kind of control of this kind of situations, because otherwise I would sit and just get frustrated. So for me, this is the way to treat anxiety, I think.
So at least you can do something to help. That keeps you sane.
Yeah, that's true.
That was Nick Thorpe reporting there. You're listening to News Hour. This is the BBC World Service in London. You're listening to News Hour with James Menendez. We're going to head to Ukraine's southern border now. Over the past few days, we've been hearing from several cities along the coast with the Black Sea and the Sea of Azov closer to the Russian border. All have come under heavy attack from Russian forces. On an estuary close to the Black Sea coast lies Mykolaiv, also in Russia's sights. Today, the authorities said an incursion had been repelled by Ukrainian troops. Well, Alexander Sanctions is the mayor of the city, Ukraine's youngest at the age of 35. What's the situation this evening?
Right now, it is the silence around the city, but let's say an hour before, we had, I think, about 6 tanks were coming into the city from the Kherson direction. Tanks that were exploring the situation around the city, so it was like exploring attack.
My understanding was Russian troops did enter earlier as well. Were they repelled by Ukrainian forces?
All the Russian forces were coming to the city and then fell back. So they go around the city in different directions. So it looks like they want to catch us in a ring, in a circle.
Were there clashes between Russians and Ukrainians?
Not too many clashes, but more, they come not too close, just our artillery not to catch them, So they don't stop because they know that if they stop, we will fight with them. And so they are moving on the, let's say, about 50-60 kilometers from Mykolaiv.
What do you need from the Ukrainian government? I mean, are you getting the sort of military supplies you need to fend off any possible attack?
We see the amount of tanks and heavy weapons coming to Mykolaiv, and we need more of these, rocket launchers like Javelin or another types of anti-tank rocket launchers that people can launch from their shoulder.
Can I ask you this? And it's a difficult question. I mean, are you going to fight back, even if that means that the Russians may just destroy the city?
Sure, we will fight. So people in the city, they don't want to resist. they want to fight with Russians. They are prepared. Everyone who can be armed, we armed these people, and we are preparing for the street fight.
And that means lots of people could die, doesn't it?
Sure, but we see the humanitarian catastrophe in Kherson right now, and people will also die.
You were elected, I think, as Ukraine's youngest mayor a couple of years ago, and you had a pretty impressive vision for your city. I think you wanted to turn it into a big sort of transportation, a big logistics hub. I mean, what's your vision now for the future? Is it just survival?
For now, the only vision is to survive and to fight with the occupant, and we don't have any plans for now. But as you see, the war has started, and now we have other plans. We learn how to fight with tanks, and no plans for now for the nearest future.
Yeah, it's difficult to make any plans, isn't it? Can I just ask you one other question? Is everybody in the city now, have they all now turned against Russia? And I ask that because I think the candidate that you beat to become mayor was from the opposition, often seen as pro-Russian. Has everybody united against the Russians?
I think we had a lot of people who loved Russia because they loved Soviet Union. So no one loved Russia here, but a lot of people loved Soviet Union because Soviet Union is the best that happens to city. Our city was the city of shipbuilders, and almost 100,000 people were connected to shipbuilding. But after Soviet Union ruined, those people, a lot of them, were without work connected to it, so they lost their jobs. They remember that time, and they wanted to turn Soviet Union back. But as soon as we got these missiles on our city on February 24th, we don't have too much people who love Russia today.
That was Alexander Sankevich, mayor of Mykolaiv. Let's get a bit more now on the story of the attack on Ukraine's biggest nuclear plant. Alexander Harchenko is an advisor to Ukraine's energy minister.
It was really a fight, and Russian invaders really made a heavy weapon fire on nuclear station. And this was the first time in world history when someone shot from heavy weapon to the nuclear station. It was broken several pipelines, including heating supply to Energodar. It's a city where people live near the station. And now it's 40,000 people have no supply of warm heat to their apartments. And it's also maybe not so big because it's not a very cold weather, but it's also a real disaster. And their multi-apartment building is extremely cold, and it's no any chance that before next 2 days it will be fixed.
So the reactors weren't damaged in any way, is that right?
The reactors weren't damaged, just a very minor damage of water supply system. It was fixed by our staff on the station quickly, and now it's no real dangerous.
What is the risk, though, of heavy artillery hitting one of the reactors? What might have happened?
The main risk is not to hit reactor itself. Reactor itself is underground and safe enough. It's very hard to break reactor itself. But the main issue is that if shells will break the power supply for reactor, in this case it will be a big trouble. Because all reactors need to be all the time online with power supply and to work their cooling system. If cooling system switch off, it means that extremely high risk that the reactor will be melted.
Russia is saying that it didn't shell the plant, and I think I also had one version of events that said that Ukrainian forces set fire to that building that was hit. Is that just just not...
The main issue that it wasn't enough Ukrainian army near the station at all. It was just a regular guard for National Guard, for our National Guardian and usual guards of station itself. It's no military around the station. That's why this territory was occupied very simply by Russians after some heavy weapon firing, and they killed, as I know, 3 of our National Guards. And from Ukrainian side, it wasn't at all any heavy weapon in Energodar. Never in the world. No one attacked the nuclear station with heavy weapons. It's just unimaginable situation.
So finally, is there a danger that if Russia takes control of these plants, that there may be an impact on the electricity supply, or at least they'll be able to cut it off if they wanted to?
They will able to cut stations from our network, yes. It's not like dead for our energy system and we have alternative. It will of course create for us a lot of complication, and we have a lot of restriction in real supply in this case. But from other side, one more time, it's not killed our system. We have alternative generation sources, and I believe that Ukrainian energy staff and people who work in energy industry will do our best to supply our army and our civilians with electricity.
That was Alexander Hochenko, advisor to Ukraine's energy minister. Well, NATO ambassadors, European Union foreign ministers and members of the G7 will be meeting in Brussels today to discuss what's going on in Ukraine. Among them, US Secretary of State Anthony Blinken. The BBC's diplomatic correspondent James Randolph just interviewed Mr. Blinken. He began by asking him, how does he think the war would play out? What we can say is this: we've seen extraordinary resilience coming from the Ukrainian people, defending their country, defending their freedom, defending their future. And I think in that sense, the war has certainly not gone as President Putin might have thought it, and might have planned. What that tells us about the future, I can't say. But what I can say as well is, having spent here in Brussels a day with NATO allies and partners, the European Union, G7, the commitment of the international community to do everything we can to help Ukraine defend itself, and also to put excruciating pressure on Russia to end this war of choice that Vladimir Putin started is real, strong, and will have an impact.
So do you think that Ukraine's defeat is inevitable? It might take time, but
they're inevitable in life or death and taxes. So I don't think anything is inevitable. But of course, it's true that the weight of the Russian military, if it puts everything into it, far exceeds that of what Ukraine's able to muster. But I don't think you can fully evaluate what the will of the Ukrainian people is, and the impact that has. And think about it this way too: if it's the intention of Moscow to try somehow to topple the government and install its own puppet regime, 45 million Ukrainians are going to reject that one way or the other.
do you fear escalation to one European war, or do you fear escalation to use of chemical or biological weapons? What is it that worries you?
Well, the main concern right now, of course, is further escalation inside Ukraine itself. We know the methods that President Putin has used in the past, whether it was in Chechnya, whether it was in Syria, whether it was in Ukraine itself back in 2014. And what we're seeing now in the last couple of days is the increasingly thorough use of force directed at civilian populations. We're seeing tremendous humanitarian suffering as a result. We're seeing Russia go after critical infrastructure that's denying Ukrainians water, denying them electricity, denying them heat. And those methods are, unfortunately, tragically, part of the Russian playbook under President Putin. And I think we're likely to see more of that.
Do you think Vladimir Putin is rational or delusional?
I can't put myself in President Putin's mindset at all. But what's extraordinary is the extent to which virtually everything President Putin over the years has said he wants to prevent is in fact precipitated. What we're seeing now is the very alliance.
Now from Glen Cove Road all the way to Little Neck Parkway. It's a crash-blocking lane. If you're heading east on the LIE in Queens, expect a long afternoon. Delays actually start right out of the Midtown Tunnel. A slow ride all the way out to the Seaford Oyster Bay Expressway, and not one bit better on the eastbound Grand Central. You're jammed right off the RFK through the Q Guards interchange and out also towards 106, 107. Also bumper to bumper both at the Whitestone and Throgs Neck bridges in both directions. Heavy delays on the southbound side of the BQE from Queens Boulevard into Brooklyn all the way down to Hamilton Avenue. You're jammed from Brooklyn at the Brooklyn Bridge. In fact, both directions of the Brooklyn Bridge just very slow. It's also very slow both directions at the Battery Tunnel. Staten Island Expressway end to end pretty much right now, right off the Verrazano Bridge, out past Victory Boulevard with a broken down vehicle. Then it stays heavy towards the West Shore Expressway. Next traffic update, 3:58, breaking traffic news when it happens. I'm Jim Feldman in the CBS Traffic Center.
Meteorologist Bob Larson has the 5-day forecast. Sunday looks great.
Big warm up. There will be a couple of showers, but at the same time might break a record high temperature Sunday. In the meantime, chilly tonight. Won't be quite as cold as last night. Certainly not as windy. Partly cloudy, low 30, mid-20s outlying areas. Increasing cloud cover tomorrow, high of 46, so we'll begin to turn milder. But much warmer weather Sunday. A couple of showers, mostly in the morning. Occasional sun breaking through Sunday afternoon. Breezy, a much warmer high near 70. Current record high on Sunday is 68, set back in 1935. We stayed mild Monday, though not as warm. Good chance for another round of rain late Monday and Monday night. Monday's high of 59. Temperatures now range from 31 in Southampton to 39 in Caldwell. 36 in Midtown for low of 30. Michael, Steve?
Bob Larson, thank you. 3:50 at WCBS. In sports, the Baseball Players Association has started a $1 million fund to support workers impacted by canceled games. Major League Baseball is expected to follow with its own fund. The Knicks have lost 6 straight. They're in Phoenix tonight. The Suns will be shorthanded with All-Stars Chris Paul and Devin Booker out with a thumb injury and COVID, respectively. And the Rangers and Devils meet tonight at the Garden. It's their second meeting this year. 3:51 on the afternoon roundup.
Exergen agrees with an important study just released by the FDA. It confirms what the medical community has known all along. Non-contact thermometers are not accurate and continually fail to meet FDA requirements for accuracy in labeling. With new strains on the rise, we can't afford to tolerate the rampant false temperature readings from non-contact thermometers. Accurate temperature measurements are essential. Use Exergen thermometers. Over 100 clinical studies. Be sure, be accurate with Exergen. Learn more. Exergen.com.
Here's a message just for the attorneys out there. So you passed the bar, joined a firm, or even built your own. Now are you finding out that you're doing more administration than actual law practice? Lexicon can help. Lexicon is a legal services and technology provider with over a decade of experience streamlining administrative tasks like timekeeping, HR, billing, client intake, and more. So you can focus on maximizing billable hours and increasing client satisfaction. See us at Legal Week or visit lexiconservices.com to learn more.
Jerry and Larry's family auto shop needed a small business loan fast so they could hire more help. Jerry suggested OnDeck.com, but instead Larry called
Loan Cannon, Loan?
There's a better way to get a fast small business loan. OnDeck, the online lender that makes it easy to apply in minutes and if approved, get your loan as soon as the same day. With lines of credit up to $100,000 and term loans up to $250,000, OnDeck lets you choose the loan that's right for your business. As America's largest online small business lender, OnDeck has funded over $14 billion to businesses like yours, so you can borrow with confidence and get your loan fast. Go to OnDeck.com. Your loan is on deck. Your business loan may be issued by OnDeck or self-declined. The Utah Chartered Industrial Bank member FDIC. Limited eligibility for safety funds. OnDeck is not lending to trade all funds subject to other approval.
Remember, your local pharmacy may be a convenient place to get your family's vaccines and boosters. While you're there, talk to your pharmacist about Comirnaty. Brought to you by BioNTech and Pfizer. Eunice's life-changing performance. Shenyun brings you beauty and wisdom of ancient China before communism. Lincoln Center, March 10th through the 20th. For tickets, visit shenyun.com. That's SHENYUN.com.
3:53 on the afternoon roundup. Russia is cracking down on news from outside sources. The Russian parliament passed a law today making the publishing of what it calls fake news a crime. CBS News reporter Mary Ilyushina is in Moscow with more.
This law is particularly scary because it carries a sentence of up to 15 years in prison for journalists or other people who are spreading information, military information that the Kremlin deems to be untrue. At least 2 independent outlets have been taken off air this week after officials accused them of reporting false information, which means basically that is not being published by official Russian sources. The Kremlin will not allow this fighting in Ukraine to be referred as an invasion or war. Russian state media tightly controls the message it broadcasts to millions of Russians, repeating Putin's claim that this is a defensive operation to protect Russia against what he calls the Ukrainian aggression. The state-run media has also never acknowledged the bombardment of Kiev, Kharkiv, or other cities outside the Donbass area. And of course, there are many Russians who see through this message and they see through this state reporting, and they're taken to the streets. According to a Russian rights group, more than 8,000 protesters have been arrested across the country. But of course, Russians can still access some independent sources. Savvy, they're being left without a comprehensive picture of what is going on in Ukraine.
Has restricted access to several international news outlets like the BBC. The Washington non-journalists could also face criminal charges for reposting content on social media that doesn't follow the Kremlin's guidelines on depicting the war. 3:55 at WCBS. Time now for Money News. Just ahead of the close from the CBS Marks Paneth Business Desk, here's Bloomberg's Tracy Jonke.
They say a picture is worth 1,000 words. At YouTube, pictures are worth as much as $300,000 if they're used to make videos out of the podcast on this platform. Bloomberg News reports YouTube is offering to pay podcast networks and producers of individual shows to create video versions of their podcasts. In a few months, you won't be able to watch new NBC shows on Hulu the day after they air. Variety reports NBC Universal is terminating its next-day streaming deal with Disney-owned Hulu. The shows will be streamed instead on NBC Universal's Peacock service. Later this year, Disney plans to offer a lower-priced, ad-supported version of its $80 a year Disney Plus streaming service. It's not saying yet what the price will be. On Wall Street, the prices have been falling all day. The Dow is down 200 points. With Money News at 25 and 55 on WCBS and Bloomberg's Tracy Jonke.
CBS Marks Paneth, the New York area's premier accounting, tax, and advisory firm.
Hi, my name is Takia, and a little thing that I love about
and delicious. This gooey mac makes me cheese every time. Order dinner delivered on the Chick-fil-A app today.
Safe braking and save money now at O'Reilly Auto Parts or order online at O'Reilly.com. Here's the PPAC Private Wealth Management Weekly Recap with Chief Investment Officer John Kramer.
Financial markets sold off sharply early last week on news of a large-scale invasion of the Ukraine by Russia. In response, broad sanctions by both the EU and the United States will be imposed on Russia in an effort to isolate the Russians and their economy. Equities rallied